Joining us now to further discuss the issue is Grant Newsham, retired U.S. Marine Colonel and former U.S. diplomat. He's also a senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of the book When China Attacks. Colonel, thank you again for joining us today. So, do you think anyone saw this coming? I mean, does this sound like that something China has been planning for some time? Are you surprised at all?
I'm not shocked, but I'm a little surprised that they tried it just now. But nonetheless, one should have seen this coming. The Chinese have gotten us overly dependent, to put it mildly, on rare earth minerals, in addition to other things like pharmaceuticals. And it was just a question of time until they thought they could pull the trigger and really throw down the gauntlet to the United States and tell them, you think you can sanction us? Well, we can do it to you too. And we've already seen this in the trade friction between America and China. A few months ago, when Mr. Trump backed down surprisingly and reduced tariff rates, and that is because the Chinese had slowed the exports of rare earth minerals. And you need these in all sorts of manufacturing in the United States. And it was obvious that some major industries were going to be hurt, if not shut down. So China, you never quite know when China would play it, but they have. And this is something I've never seen before. But you can see China is sort of moving and really doesn't seem to care about the consequences, or else it's, as is often the case, it's putting on a very massive bluff that is going to scare a lot of people and cause a lot of disruption.
So, in light of President Trump's post talking about very high level tariffs, do you think China will back down?
Depends on what the Americans do. See, because what China has been able to accomplish in all of its economic growth and its overseas activities, it's done it without a currency that is freely convertible, which means that nobody much wants it. So they have been dependent on having access to US dollars. And this has always been a huge vulnerability to them. And that is what President Trump is talking about. You raise tariffs high enough, and Chinese exports go down. They don't earn the convertible currency, the real money, the US dollars that they need to fund the People's Republic of China. That hurts them, and they're vulnerable. Nobody has ever tried that, actually, the way they should have. And I'm told that during the first Trump administration, he actually refused to sanction Chinese banks, in other words, cut off access to US dollars, even when China was stuffing out democracy or any sort of freedom in Hong Kong. Maybe the time has come. Mr. Trump learned his lesson in the first administration and is going to play the financial card, and particularly going after the fact Chinese currency is not freely convertible. So it's sort of like old Confederate money.
So, Colonel, I'm wondering here how far could this escalate to? Because Trump did say, he did mention potentially a painful scenario for the U.S. As he is forced to counter China's move. How are we going to see this play out?
Well, he's right about disruption. There is no workaround to the dependency that America and the free nations have built up on the China market, on access of these sorts of materials and products from China. This is the result of 30, 40 years, really, of just reckless, if not craven behavior by America's business, financial, and political classes. You don't overcome this easily. It would probably take you at least 2 or 3 years if you went all out, had a real sense of urgency to overcome this barrel the Chinese have got us over when it comes to rare earth materials. So that's just one part of it. But these things have a way, actually, of escalating. One thing leads to another. So we impose something on China, they impose something back on us. And you find there's a psychological change where you start to look at the other guy, not just as someone with whom you've got a dispute, but as someone you hate. And I think we could be seeing potentially the decoupling from the China market, from China, and vice versa. It's this really break of the division of the world into two trading blocks, one free, one not. And this could happen. It's been talked about, but this may be the thing that drives it. But we'll have to see. And these things, as I say, do have a way of escalating in a way that nobody quite expects.
So, at the beginning, you mentioned timing here, and perhaps you said you were a little bit surprised. Would you be able to elaborate a bit further, talk a little bit more about the timing?
Well, part of the problem that the Chinese regime has is that what you're seeing on display and what it's doing is what is sometimes called fake it till you make it. And when you have got, as I said, a currency which really is not usable internationally in any useful way, uh, but you've also got at least 600 million people in your country who live on $5 a day or less. And that's what the Chinese admit to. So it's probably higher than that. And this is not really an economic success. Their economy is in big trouble and has lots of problems. And to pick a fight with the United States, and the United States is capable of biting back pretty harshly, that this is the Chinese regime taking a gamble. And the idea being that somehow they can sort of weather any pressure we apply to them, or we will lose interest and back down, as we often do. But so they've rolled the dice to see how this is going to come. I didn't know exactly when they would do it. Doesn't surprise me though, if you follow sort of Chinese behavior, Chinese language, and also just what they're doing sort of on the economic, diplomatic, political warfare, and even the military front. And there has been a real hardening in the last 6 months on the part of the Chinese government. And so the timing, I wouldn't have guessed it, but it doesn't shock me, but you never quite knew when it would happen. And also China does look at the United States imposing sanctions on technology exports to China and expanding them, including quite recently. And there is a resentment that's there. The Chinese are always resentful. So maybe that, I suspect that is part of the thinking as well. They're just angry. They have some tools. They have some pretty good cards to play when it comes to rare earths. So maybe now they didn't feel like backing down. And also, if the Americans can't manufacture, that includes for both commercial but also military purposes, and China can, well, their manufacturing and military buildup goes on steroids, where ours is scraping, looking for the materials we need to actually build up our military and military hardware. So they may like the timing that they've got the advantage, we don't, and maybe they thought this was the time to push.
Okay, so President Trump said in that post that he's not meeting with Chinese regime leader Xi Jinping anymore. Do you see that potentially as further degradation of relations of the two countries?
Oh, not really. I think the Americans have often seemed too eager to talk to people. It's maybe an American conceit that if we can just talk to somebody, we can work out our differences. So it's probably a good thing that the Americans don't feel compelled to speak with and meet directly with Xi Jinping. But at the same time, Mr. Trump didn't cancel the meeting because he was happy, because the relationships are good. It does show some real problems. And you combine it, this Chinese economic assault, with their military buildup, their military aggression throughout the region, and also their export of fentanyl, deadly drugs to the United States, has killed well over 500,000 Americans since about 2013. Mr. Trump just might think, well, maybe the Chinese don't like us much, and maybe a war has started, not a shooting war, but Donald Trump understands the PRC, despite sometimes it seems he's a little eager to reach a deal with them. That may be just tactics, but he understands the nature of that regime. So you saw in his through social posts that he said something like, "Well, I always thought they were lying in wait." And you say he knew. So we'll see how this comes. But this is the fact they're not meeting in Seoul. I don't really think that's a huge deal when it comes down to it. In some ways, it's a good thing that the Americans, for once, are keeping their mouths zipped.
Okay, Colonel, I just want to ask one more question, and this relates to what Trump said that the U.S. has monopoly positions that are much stronger and more far reaching than China's. What are those monopoly positions?
Well, one is the US dollar, and that's probably the biggest one we've got. The biggest club is that China has to have US dollars, convertible currency, to do everything, to buy, say, Australian iron ore, to make steel, to build its navy, just to pay to keep the lights on at their embassies overseas. You need those US dollars, and that is a huge monopoly. And also, technology from the United States and from our allies to China is something the Chinese absolutely have to have. Yes, we're dependent on Chinese rare earths, but they're dependent on hardware, very high technology that we provide and sell to them. And you can see by their reaction when we do impose controls on that, they scream. And that's the one thing Xi Jinping complains about all the time, is the weaponization of trade. So they depend on us an awful lot, and probably more than we do on them. Although the rare earth bottlenecks is very troubling, and it's something that we should never have gotten ourselves into. So we do have a hand to play, and then we also have the hand to play, and that's exposing the obscene wealth of Xi Jinping, his family, and the other top Chinese leaders. This is the one thing that scares the daylights out of them. They have got billions, and much of it overseas in their supposed enemies, the United States, Canada, UK, Australia. And whenever this is threatened to be exposed, the Chinese embassy in Washington starts calling around, begging people not to do it. And this really terrifies them. So we have some asymmetric responses that we could apply on the Chinese that would cause them plenty of trouble. But they have certainly, they're playing their cards very aggressively here. And we'll see if the United States understands and has a proper response to it. But there is an element of bluff in what the Chinese are doing, but not entirely, since we've spent the last 30, 40 years pretending the Chinese Communist Party is something which it isn't, and that it is not out to ultimately dominate, if not destroy us. So, as I say, they are still have some dependent things they need from us. And as I said, when you have a country which has 600 million people at least living on $5 a day, that is not exactly a very stable place economically. And that is something that also scares the Chinese leadership. So we have a number of tools that we can use if we choose to do it and have the stomach to do it as well.
It's fascinating. I didn't know that Xi Jinping's wealth was a card that the U.S. could actually play. Very fascinating. Well, thank you so much for talking to us today, Colonel. Pleasure.
And thanks very much.